Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing your bookish icks. Alright guys, so I thought this would be a fun, chatty, laid-back kind of video. This video actually came about because I was hosting reading sprints over on my Patreon, and my friend Lizelle was explaining why she wasn't enjoying this very popular fantasy romance book, and then other people were joining the conversation saying what kind of turns them off in fantasy romance. So I figured, why not ask over on my Instagram for everyone to share their bookish icks. And some of the responses, I was laughing. They are so specific, and I'm very excited just to go through the responses and talk about them. Now, I will say reading is subjective, so what might be someone else's bookish ick, you might absolutely love in fantasy romance, and that is totally okay. This is just supposed to be a video for fun, not to hurt anybody's feelings or to yuck on your yum or anything like that. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Now, I will say I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about your bookish icks. Alright guys, so I have my computer here and I actually emailed the responses to myself. Now, admittedly, when I do these videos, I normally go through the responses and try to categorize them so there is some sort of order. I did not do that this time around just because I am running really late and it is almost 5 o'clock and I still have a ton of editing to do, so we are just gonna wing it and see how this goes. But I am now on the first page of responses and it looks like a lot of people said miscommunication trope or a miscommunication trope in the third act. So I completely agree, and I'll actually expand on that and say miscommunication trope, especially when the problem is predictable, like you saw it coming from the very beginning of the book. You knew this was going to be the issue that they had miscommunication over. That drives me bonkers. And also when it's to the detriment of the character. Like suddenly this very strong character who has had no trouble communicating in the past, suddenly there's a ridiculous issue. So I completely agree. Miscommunication, not about it. Next up is slang from real world in fantasy setting. I actually use that as an example because I never noticed this before until I did a video that was somewhat similar to this. It was like bookish hot takes. And someone said that, and I was like, what do you mean? And they gave examples, and now anytime I catch it in fantasy romance, it drives me nuts. So I completely agree. Slang from real world in fantasy romance. Also, it's not on this page, but I know someone else said current phrases in historical settings. So that is another thing that I've noticed so many, this isn't historical, but so many Taylor Swift song names in books, and I actually think someone specifically said Taylor Swift in romance books. I love Taylor Swift. I do not need her song titles hidden in a bunch of different romance books. It was cool the first few times it happened, but now it's happening constantly, and I agree. We don't need that anymore. But also current things or current phrases in historical settings really can take you out of the story. And I feel like sometimes authors don't even realize they're doing it because we use these phrases so much that you don't know when they originated. So I agree with all of that. Next up we have, someone said just historical in general. I disagree with that. I do like historical. I actually really liked historical fiction when I was in college, and before starting YouTube, I used to read a ton of historical fiction. There are some historical romances I really enjoy, and I've read a couple of historical fantasies, so disagree with that. I like historical, but I can see there's some people that it's just not for them. Totally get it. This is more a bookstore ick, but when they mix YA and adult genres, I fix this all the time. I recently saw ACOTAR in the YA section, and I was like, I disagree. Also, a series that I always see in YA, and I guess because technically it is considered young adult, is the Boys of Tommen series. But honestly, I feel like that should not be in the YA section. Like, that is dealing with such hard topics. I don't know if it's appropriate for younger readers, but that's just a me thing. You can completely disagree with me. But yeah, I agree. I don't love seeing adult books in YA setting. And I feel like the covers have a lot to do with that, mostly because a lot of these like cartoon covers, if you don't know what the book is about, you're gonna assume it's probably for a younger reader, and then you might end up placing it in the YA accidentally. So I can totally see how that can happen. But yeah, I feel like bookstores really need to make sure they're not accidentally putting those books in the wrong spots, because some of those spicy scenes are, I would not want my younger nieces, nephews, cousins to be reading. So until they're older and can understand it a little bit better. Okay, next up is too many anatomical descriptions in spicy scenes, and this person put pelvic floor, labia, etc. I tend to agree. I'm gonna try to find all the spicy ones, and I'll save those for the end because some of those had me cackling. But yeah, I agree. I don't need all of the anatomical. Yeah. I also just realized I was out of focus this entire time. I really hope that hasn't been since the beginning of this video, but it's fixed now. So yay. Next up is FMC pregnancy during the main story, also overusing pet names. FMC pregnancy doesn't really bother me. Sometimes accidental or secret pregnancy where like the woman finds out she's pregnant but then doesn't tell the boyfriend or husband until like 10 years later, that I completely hate. That is one of my biggest icks, but just her being pregnant, that's not really an ick, but I do agree with the pet name. There are some pet names I'm not a fan of. So yeah, Babe being one, I hate the pet name Babe. There's a few that are just like, I hear them and I'm not a fan. Using too many pop references, this is exactly what I was saying. Using too many pop references, having Taylor Swift songs in every single romance book is getting old. Already said it, completely agree with that. This is a very specific one, but it's when the heroine says, "Time to put the big girl pants on." I have read so many books that have this line, and I don't even think I realized it until your comment. So yes, I do not love that line. I feel like there's much better ways to get that feeling across than using "time to put the big girl panties on." Yeah, I concur. Next up is FMCs who are not like other girls. I just feel like that comes with that just is a thing, especially with, I feel like young adult fantasy romance and kind of fantasy romance in general. It's always like, you're not like other girls. Like Katniss was like super good at hunting and that's always how they're presented. So I'm just used to it at this point, but I can totally see how that can be kind of frustrating. I feel like contemporary romance is kind of doing a better job at not having that trope. But yeah, I feel like that's more of a fantasy romance thing where the hero is just not like other girls. Agree with this completely. I'm also so mad at myself now that I didn't categorize these because this would have been a much more fluid video. But solid one color sprayed edges with no design or no stencil. I've gotten to a point where I don't gravitate towards those. So if I see sprayed edges and they're just plain, even ombre, I'm not as willing to put out extra money as if they were a stencil edge or something like that. I just feel like it's becoming the norm to have sprayed edges, and it's not as exciting if there's no sort of like stencil or thing like that. But that is just my personal opinion. And sometimes just the plain color is absolutely beautiful. Just personally for me, if I'm gonna spend more money, I would like it to have some sort of like design on the sprayed edge. A character's nickname being overused, being unneededly said too often. I kind of already said that as far as like pet names and things like that. When they're called that constantly. Actually, my husband did not know Violet's name for a while. He kept calling her Violence. And I think it's because Xaden refers to Violet as Violence almost the entire book of Fourth Wing. So yeah, I can definitely see how nicknames can get annoying. When every mystery in the book gets wrapped up unrealistically in one chapter. I haven't found this recently, but I remember when I was reading, there's a specific thriller author that does this all the time, and it drives me cuckoo bananas. Lucy Foley. Every time, I can't with her thrillers. It does that, And I just feel like there's all of this buildup just to get a very obvious, like, one chapter, few paragraph explanation of everything that was going on. So yes, I agree with that. But I don't find it very often in fantasy romance, I feel like. I feel like I find that more in, like, suspense and thrillers. But honestly, I don't think I've ever found that with romantic suspense. I feel like they do a pretty good job, or at least the ones I've read. Specifically, Mia Sheridan, I feel like her thrillers or romantic suspense are really, really, really good. When it constantly changes from past to present, just not my thing. Someone said that. I disagree. I feel like there are some authors that do this so, so well. Oh my gosh, who's the author that wrote Elizabeth O'Rourke? I feel like she does that very well. There's a few authors that have done this that I think it's done, like, they do it perfect. Now, I have read books that do the whole past, present, and I'm not as big a fan, but if it's done well, it hits, and it's great. So, disagree if it's done well. And this next one, I wasn't sure if I was going to include, but I'm going to do my best to explain my feelings. So it says, why step-siblings think it's taboo to be together. The parents should have expected it. Now, I read that and I was like, that is such an interesting take. I completely disagree. However, if we're coming from the context of most of the taboo forbidden romances I've read with step-siblings, the step-siblings have been full-fledged, almost adults by the time they became step-siblings. So they're normally like 17 or 18. Normally the girl's 17, the boy's 18, just to add a little bit more forbiddenness. And then they are put together and become step-siblings and are now forced to live in the same house. And there's hormones and things like that. So I do understand why this person is saying that the parents should not be shocked if their step-siblings end up getting together. Now, am I okay with that? Not at all. I do not condone step-siblings getting together. This is totally in terms of forbidden romance. But I do see what this person, I think, is trying to say, that you're putting these two teenagers that have hormones in the same house, and if they are already kind of older, I get why they might consider hooking up. So yeah, that is a very controversial take. Once again, not condoning that at all. If you are step-siblings, please stay away from each other. But yeah. So I read that one and I had a lot of thoughts about it. So I wanted to share. When they break up because one refuses to listen to the other, communicate, I always agree. I feel like effective communication. However, I also think the opposite of that is also kind of an ick personally for me. There was one book that I really actually ended up enjoying that I feel like the characters communicated too well for being strangers. It was Out on a Limb, and amazing contemporary romance book, highly recommend. But these two people end up having a one-night stand and end up becoming pregnant after, and they communicate so unbelievably well, and I just feel like that's not normal or typical just because you're two strangers. How are you this effective and good at communicating? Like, I was honestly jealous of them halfway through this book. So I feel like realistic communication is my favorite. I feel like people are gonna miscommunicate. That's gonna happen in relationships, but also like being somewhat effective. I guess I'm just really picky with my communication in books is what I'm realizing as I do this video. Let's see. No communication, miscommunication. When you can predict the ending halfway through the book, I feel like that has been a big issue with the books I've been reading this year, is that a lot of fantasy romance is getting a little bit formulaic, and I am able, and not just me personally, like I'm not great at it, but just in general, I feel like it's getting easier to guess how a book is gonna end and like the big twists and everything. So yeah, I agree with that. I'm not a huge fan of having predictable reads, not a fan. When the FMC goes from an, I'll save that one for later. That's a good one though. Next up is cracking spines, keep them pristine. I crack spines, I'm sorry. But I do, that is such an ick for a lot of people, and it's funny because I don't read a ton of physical books, but when I did, I would borrow them from my friend who does not crack her spines. She does not dog-ear pages. She keeps her book perfect. And anytime I would read them, I'd be so afraid. Like, I was so gentle with them because I dog-ear all of my pages. I crack spines, all of that. But yeah, I think that's just a personal preference type thing. When the hero's perspective is only about how much he wants, I'm going to say, she used a different word, how much he wants to sleep with the heroine. Sir, please stop it. Agree. If that is the only thing the hero is bringing to the table is him lusting after the female main character, I'm not about that at all. That can get a little bit repetitive and a little bit annoying. So very much agree there. Unplanned pregnancy, I kind of already went over that. When they give really simple names for specific magic, i.e. moonlings drawing from the moon. Yeah, there's a lot of fantasy romance words. I don't know how to explain this, but I found that also, where there are sometimes these books that are so beautifully written and they're very immersive, but then they use Facebook in the Zodiac Academy instead of Facebook and things like that, where I'm like, oh, didn't love that. So yeah, I kind of agree with you. Moonlings, that one didn't bug me, but there are definitely a few that I'm like, I'm not a big fan of. Miscommunication, again. Cliffhangers, that's an interesting take. Because I actually love cliffhanger endings, because I never used to be this person, but I've slowly become this person that starts a book series and does not continue after the first book. And I feel like if there is a cliffhanger, it almost gives me the motivation to immediately pick the second book up. But I also understand the downside, especially if you have to wait like 2 years for the next book to come out, and you might have to reread the book or things like that. So I personally love a good cliffhanger ending, but I can also see how they can be really, really frustrating. I'm going to save another one for later. Cringy terms of endearment, agree. Aside from harming books, overuse of certain words in spicy scenes, and I'll talk about that also a little bit later, but completely agree. Okay, I very much disagree with this take, and I'm very curious why you feel this way. It's playlists in books. Now, if you're just talking about like in the very beginning of a book, sometimes like around the table of contents, they'll have a playlist that you can listen to while reading the book. I actually absolutely love those. Now, I will say sometimes if you're reading through that playlist, it can give away spoilers because you know what those songs relate to. So in that way, I could see it kind of being like a Bookish Ick. But honestly, I love those playlists. Like, I listen to them. Half of my Spotify is just Bookish playlists. So I'm going to DM you and see why you're not a fan. Let's see. Using modern slang. Already went over that one. Books stacked vertically with their spines out facing in bookstores. Yeah, I can see how that would be annoying. I don't think I've ever really experienced that, but 100%. I like a lot of people had like, there's a decent amount of bookstore ones in here. Third act breakup, for sure, especially when it's months or years before they get over it. That's, yeah. Another one that I don't know if I missed it because I thought I saw it when people were submitting their responses was when it's second chance, but 10 to 15 years have gone by and they pick it up like nothing has changed. I feel like in a 10 to 15 year span, you've completely changed as a person. Like me now at the age I am, I'm sorry, I just hit my mic. That probably was really loud. Me now at the age I am versus like 23-year-old me is so unbelievably different. So I don't love that in books. If there's been like 15 years and immediately they just pick up hot and heavy like they did in high school, I feel like you need to kind of find out a little bit more about the person before all of that goes on. All right, so the rest of these are a little bit spicier. So first up is when the FMC goes from an innocent virgin to some sort of natural born sex goddess without any triggers. What the F? Okay, this isn't an ick for me, but this happens so often. Specifically in dark and mafia romance, I feel like we start out with this very like almost adorable, naive virgin hero, and then like after the first time, she is suddenly into everything in the bedroom. Like she knows everything and wants to try everything, and it just is such a change from who we started with. But once again, that it's not an ick for me. Like it doesn't bother me. I'm just kind of used to it. But it is something that does happen. So I can totally see why you wouldn't be a fan of that. Another person said, Men's private parts having independent thoughts from their owners. My duck perked up at her tits. Hate, hate, hate. I didn't realize this was an ick for me until you left this response, and now I completely agree. It is very specific, but that is something I very much dislike, is when the appendages have thoughts of their own. I don't read a ton of books that have that, but I can think of a few that have done it where I've been like, that's interesting. So yes, agree. I loathe the word mule in spicy scenes. Throws me out of the story. She's a woman, not a baby. This is another one that I didn't know I didn't like until you submitted your response, because I absolutely hate that. Any sort of like infantilizing women, not about it. So yeah, I don't know if I can think of, I don't know anyone that I've read that used that, because I feel like that would be a standout. This isn't spicy, but this is something that I picked up from Murphy Napier. She was one of the first booktubers that I started watching, and she pointed out that almost every single book has the word undulate in it. And now that I have said that to you, you will notice it in every single book you read. I am talking novella, like the spiciest novellas that are only 200 pages. I swear you will probably find the word undulate. Every single book I read, I almost find it, and I don't know why, because it's not a word that I feel like a lot of people use in like daily conversations, but she's 100% right. That word is in everything. So that is one of my biggest icks, is once I hit undulate, I'm like, darn it, especially when it's really late in the book, because I think I found a book that doesn't have it, and then it sneaks in there. So yeah, that was all of your Bookish Icks. So thank you guys so much for watching. If I missed one of your responses, please let me know down in the comments below, and I will react to it in the comments. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Leslie, Erin, and Kat. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!